Have you ever wondered why you don't sound like a native speaker when you're learning your second language? Well, what you're actually noticing is your foreign accent. As a normal experience in learning a second language, most people tend to develop a foreign accent. However, in this video, we will dive into what exactly are foreign accents, why they occur, and how to change your accent if that's your goal. Hello, my name is Grisel Bennett and I'm one of the linguistic specialists and English educators at Unbounded Education. And today we'll be talking about foreign accents and what they are. If you like videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button and let's start with the video. If you haven't watched our video about foreign accents, be sure to watch it here or wherever it'll appear on your screen. But to be concise, foreign accents are essentially when you apply phonological rules of your native language onto your second language. And this is something that we do pretty much unconsciously because your brain tends to like familiarity. So I can give an example. If certain sounds don't exist in your foreign language, for example, the th sound in English doesn't exist in French, this can cause your brain to find a sound that is pretty much similar. For example, the word three has the th sound, and when native French speakers try to pronounce this word, they often pronounce it as tree.
Okay, say three. Tree.
And here's a little example of that. It's important to differentiate having an accent versus having poor pronunciation, because although you may think that your accent is preventing you from going somewhere, it is possible to have a foreign accent in a language and still be able to communicate effectively. But the difference between that and having poor pronunciation is that your audience could comprehend what you were saying. If people are unable to understand you, that's essentially just poor pronunciation rather than having a foreign accent. So now you may be wondering, can I even get rid of my accent? Well, as a second language learner, you must know that it's pretty much normal to develop a foreign accent as you learn a language later in life. So don't be embarrassed. Actually, only 40% of the world's population actually speaks a second language. So cherish it, embrace it. But you can change your accent if that's your goal. Some people, when they want to learn a language, they do want to sound as native-like as possible. So I'll tell you a few tips. To minimize your foreign accent, there's one crucial step that a lot of people forget to take, and that is to choose an accent. As you may sound different from native speakers, a lot of native speakers sound different from one another. And this means that there's different accents, there's different dialects. One language can have multiple different accents. Let's take French, for example. There's Swiss French, there's Parisian French, there's Canadian French, there's Belgian French. There are so many different types of varieties. And even in these dialects, there's different accents. For example, let's take Quebec. Quebec is the main French-speaking province in Canada. And in Quebec, the main city, Montreal, has more of a neutral way of speaking. However, if you take a city up in the north, such as Gaspé, they speak, even though it's still the Quebecois accent, the Quebecer accent in English, they have more a thicker, it's more difficult for Parisians, individuals from Paris, to understand people from Gaspé versus Montreal. And this will tell you that even though it's a similar region, people can have different accents depending on what city, what area that they're from. So using this, you should identify what type of accent that you want to emulate and achieve in your foreign accent. So now that you have chosen an accent, now you have to be immersed by this accent as much as possible. So what this means, you have to watch television shows, series, films, etc. and try to have the accent as the main, like anytime you have interaction with this language, have that particular accent be the one that you are being immersed with. For example, let's say I would like to learn the American variety of English. I would be trying to consume as much material in American English. I wouldn't necessarily want to see British media when I'm trying to emulate the American accent. So as you're watching these films, these TV shows, etc., you must try to scrutinize and compare and contrast. How do you sound versus a native speaker? So you will compare, try to copy how they speak, and observe their cadence. For example, in spoken English, specifically American English, contractions are used almost always. We say can't instead of cannot. We say don't instead of do not. So that's an example. Although using media is very important in the beginning, you must also do active practice as well. Without active practice, you will not be able to develop this accent. So as you observe, try to mimic how people speak. So try talking to yourself in the language, but as you're talking to yourself, try to mimic how you would think native speakers would speak. And keep doing this. As you keep doing this, your brain will retrain itself of how to sound when speaking this particular language. Try to copy the rhythm. Try to include filler words if we're talking about specifically English. Try to include etc. The more you try to imitate native speakers and emulate how they would speak, the more your brain will become accustomed, and eventually it will become natural for you, and this accent will actually become native to you as well. To gauge your progress, I suggest that you try recording yourself, and as you are listening to the recordings, try to see whether or not you sound like a native speaker. Try to see if you have any areas of improvement. You could try apps like Tandem or Hello Talk to try and get in contact with native speakers of your target language. So you could, let's say you want to learn American English via Tandem and Hello Talk, you can be connected to someone from the States. So it is possible. And as you are communicating with this person, you could send those recordings to them and ask them, oh, do I need any areas of improvement? You could also try to do this if you have any friends who speak whatever accent you're trying to emulate. So it is possible to receive feedback for free, but if you do want to spend money, you can get a speech language pathologist, who are people who specialize in speech therapy in order to help you change your accent. But just know that there are so many valuable resources on the internet for you that you don't even necessarily have to spend a dime. There's YouTube videos. You could use us as an example of how to emulate the American accent. You could use podcasts, watch interviews. You can even use language exchange apps that I suggested earlier. There are so many options in order for you to change your accent to a more native-like one if that's your goal. In closing, having a foreign accent isn't necessarily bad, because the whole point is we have to communicate with each other. If you have a foreign accent and we're speaking and I understand everything you're saying, that's the whole point. But if you do want to achieve a native-like accent, it's going to take a little bit more trial and error. You'll have to retrain your brain and understand the patterns of native speakers. Best of luck on your language journey and keep learning.